You're listening to Four Things to Know, a WCCO daily news podcast.
Today is Wednesday, January 14th. I'm Maria Lizignoli.
And I'm Johnny Connor. Thanks for listening to Four Things to Know.
Our top story. Today marks 1 week since Renee Nicole Good was shot and killed in her SUV. And new today, we're hearing the ICE agent who fatally shot Good suffered from internal bleeding to the torso following the incident. That's according to 2 U.S. officials briefed on his medical condition. The head of Homeland Security, Kristi Noem, said Good was a, quote, domestic terrorist who was trying to run over an ICE agent. Noem says the agent who shot her, Jonathan Ross, saved his own life and the life of his partners. Minneapolis Mayor Jacob Frey, among others, opposes that statement, saying Good was trying to get away from agents, not attack them. In the wake of Good's death, people across the state have been mobilizing. At the University of Minnesota campus last night, protesters were gathered outside the Graduate Hotel, making noise in hopes to disturb federal agents that they believed were staying in the hotel. University of Minnesota police say 3 arrests were made after last night's protest. They also say there was some property damage from the protesting.
Number 2, earlier today, the first hearing against the Trump administration by Minnesota's Attorney General and Twin Cities mayors was held. Esme Murphy has those details.
A federal judge denied the state for now and Minneapolis and St. Paul's request for an immediate restraining order to block ICE from continuing its operations in Minnesota. But the judge made it very clear that she is open to the possibility of a TRO at a later date, but she first needs to hear from the federal government and their response. The judge said several times she did not want her failure to issue a TRO today be an indication of which way she's leaning. Judge Kate Menendez said, "I think the issues are really important, and I don't want to suggest by not acting immediately one way or the other that I think they are unimportant. To the contrary, I understand this is important to everybody." Now, the Assistant Minnesota Attorney General for the state of Minnesota, Brian Carter, said, quote, "The situation is escalating. Defendants have sent now nearly 3,000 masked, heavily armed agents to the site, to the Twin Cities, and they are engaged in a pattern of unlawful, violent conduct, illegal racial profiling, excessive force, warrantless force, entries into homes, and they are openly flaunting state criminal code." The judge said she needed to see the response by the federal government by January 19th. The attorney for the federal government actually tried to get the judge to postpone that date because it's Martin Luther King Day. The judge said no postponement because this issue is too important to too many people in this community. The judge said January 22nd for another response from the state of Minnesota, and she said January 23rd and 26th, the days for possible oral arguments.
Number 3. Renee Good's loved ones have taken the next step towards a possible lawsuit, hiring an attorney many in the Twin Cities might remember. WCCO's Adam Duxter reports from the Memorial on 34th and Portland with the latest.
Today, a spokesperson for the law firm Romanucci and Blandon confirmed to WCCO that they are now hired on as the legal representation for Renee Good's loved ones. And now this certainly doesn't mean there is anything filed as far as a civil lawsuit, but this would certainly be the first step in making that happen. And if that firm sounds at all familiar to any of our viewers, it is the same firm that represented family members of George Floyd following his death in 2020, and their civil lawsuit against the city of Minneapolis and 4 officers involved netted at that time a record-setting $27 million settlement for the Floyd family. This comes as this memorial site continues to draw people from all over the Twin Cities a week later, including a group of religious leaders today who have been praying here ever since 9:37 a.m., the exact time that Renee Good was shot and killed here by federal agent Jonathan Ross 1 week ago. And these faith leaders say they will continue to pray for 3 continuous hours until 12:37 a.m. They say that is symbolic of the 3 shots that were fired by Agent Ross.
Number 4, today we found out the U.S. Department of Justice filed a lawsuit against the state of Minnesota. In a press release from the DOJ, it says the suit challenges Minnesota's employer requirement that state jobs implement sex and race-based affirmative action plans. The The DOJ highlights that under Minnesota law right now, the state uses, quote, affirmative action goals on all staffing and personnel decisions. Attorney General Pam Bondi says that this is in violation of federal law. She adds that making hiring decisions based on characteristics like race and sex is simple discrimination. As of this recording, we have not yet heard a response from state leaders, but we will keep you updated tonight on WCCO TV. Those are the 4 things to know today. Now let's check in on our forecast.
Hi, next weather meteorologist Lisa Meadows. Here's your forecast as we head into tonight. It's going to be cold. Temps dropping down to 9, your overnight low. Heading into tomorrow, we hit 31, and then we bring in some snowfall as we go midday tomorrow. We could have some slowdowns on your Thursday evening commute.
And now, here's more to know.
Today, members and leaders of ATU Local 1005, who keep Metro Transit running, spoke out against immigration enforcement in our state. Union members and leaders say a bus driver saw a Minnesotan grabbed by ICE agents just last week. Many shared other experiences when ICE has impacted their ability to do their jobs. Members like David Stiggers say ICE needs to avoid interfering with transit operations to ensure the safety of travelers.
What we are seeing now, indiscriminate raids, militarized tactics in residential neighborhoods, and disregard for basic rights, this tears at the fabric of our society.
During the press conference, union members shared that a Metro Transit operator was detained by ICE for days. And as for January 23rd, which activists are calling a day of no work, shopping, or school, the union says it's not an option for them to not work, but they do support the idea and will participate in other ways.
As federal agents continue to increase their footprint in the state, demonstrators and observers are following right behind them. In Minneapolis, WCCO photojournalist Tom Avilis saw cars trailing federal agents. His camera was rolling as agents hopped out and took a man into custody. Observers like Angel Castillo Saldana says it's his right to be there.
They are moving like cartel members. They're moving very corruptly. I'm not following. I patrol my streets. I grew up in these neighborhoods.
And the city's top cop, Brian O'Hara, says observing is a right, but interference is not.
Would following an ICE agent for several miles be considered obstructing?
That is not unlawful unless you're committing some separate unlawful act, provided you're not tailgating, speeding, running red lights, any other aggressive or reckless maneuvers.
The biggest message from Chief O'Hara, people should not be committing illegal acts while exercising their First Amendment rights. City leaders continue to urge peace. Yesterday, we told you several top prosecutors resigned, including Minnesota's point man when it comes to fraud, Joe Thompson. Now, they haven't said why they're stepping down, but we do know they were asked to investigate the shooting death of Renee Good. You might not know their names, but you're likely to recognize the faces of some of these prosecutors, especially Joe Thompson. He has spoken publicly several times over the last few years as the acting U.S. attorney and the first assistant U.S. attorney. Thompson was central to investigations on all things fraud, but he also led the investigations into other high-profile cases, like the assassination of Speaker Emerita Melissa Hortman and the shooting at Annunciation Church. Doug Kelly, a former federal prosecutor, called this a very dark day for Minnesota.
There has been just a real tradition in Minnesota that the United States Attorney's Office maintains its independence and calls the shots based on what it believes is correct. And I think today this does tremendous harm to that tradition.
WCCO has reached out to several of the prosecutors who stepped down. So far, we haven't heard back. The current U.S. Attorney for Minnesota, Daniel Rosen, declined to comment.
It's easy to lose sight of what started this whole investigation, which is in part fraud. And now with those half dozen resignations at the U.S. Attorney's Office, who and how those cases are investigated is up in the air. And at the same time, new details continue to come out, including another man accused of defrauding Medicaid and stealing more than $3 million over 4 years. Ashley Grams looks into the new fraud charges at the state level.
State prosecutors allege Mohammed Omar Heed engaged in an extensive plan using Guardian Home Health Services to bill Medicaid for services that weren't provided. Court documents claim he encouraged employees to bill as much as they could to make more money regardless of whether they performed the work. Prosecutors say he even billed for daily services at times while recipients were hospitalized or incarcerated. A second person, Marianne Garad, is also charged in the scheme and accused of aiding Omar Heed in submitting fraudulent claims. This state case is separate from the federal fraud investigation ongoing in Minnesota and a fraction of what a U.S. prosecutor believes is the full extent of fraud in the state. Fraud they believe could total $9 billion or more. Federal prosecutors have not shared how they arrived at that estimate, though so far 90 people have been charged. On the state level, Attorney General Keith Ellison says he's prosecuted more than 300 cases and recovered over $80 million since taking office in 2019. Less than a week ago, the Minnesota Department of Human Services, along with the federal government, announced they're planning to freeze new enrollments for 13 Medicaid services at high risk for fraud. The state has also been directed to review and revalidate enrollment for providers in those categories.
Republicans have been critical of both Attorney General Ellison and Governor Walz, arguing the two have turned a blind eye to the growing fraud problem. Both Ellison and Walz have been asked to testify before the House Oversight Committee next month. The committee chair has said they would subpoena Walz and Ellison if they don't appear voluntarily.
Happening today, state officials will address cuts to federal funding in Minnesota and what it could mean for a number of programs. Last week, the USDA announced it would be suspending all payments to Minnesota amid the state's fraud crisis. In total, more than $120 million are being withheld. USDA leaders asked the state to now provide justification for federal spending to their office. The federal funding is used for programs like the Centers for Medicare and Medicaid Services and SNAP. Look for updates on air and online at WCCO.com.
We're expecting to learn more today about a story we've been following since last fall. An arrest has been made after an infant became unresponsive and later died in Savage last September. It happened at Rocking Horse Ranch Daycare. According to court documents, in the days before the baby's death, another child had been seriously sick. The documents add that the same employee had cared for them both. Police announced an arrest in this case yesterday, but they did not identify the suspect. The child who died was 11-month-old Harvey Mickelbust. He was just days away from his first birthday. His family is expected to speak alongside officials at a press conference this afternoon. Look for updates in our later newscasts and online at WCCO.com. Maria, let's get to sports. It was a big night for the Timberwolves last night. Across the border, they handled the Milwaukee Bucks with ease, and they did it without Rudy Gobert and Anthony Edwards. So pretty impressive, right?
Wow, some of the top players.
Yeah, and now the Wolves sit just a half game out of second place in the Western Conference. The other border battle, though, unfortunately, my alma mater, the Gophers, they lost last few seconds to the Wisconsin Badgers last night at home.
Oh, that's a bummer.
1-1.
Border battle.
Yeah, 1-1, I guess we'll take it. The Minnesota United have a new head coach. Cameron Knowles filed in as an interim head coach 2 years ago, and then he stayed here as an assistant, and he was introduced as the new leader yesterday. The team has had a roster shakeup, so he knows what he's getting into and what might need to happen.
And I think anytime there is transition and change, there's new opportunities for guys. And we're seeing that. We've seen that in the last 2 days of training, and I think it's only fair that we get a real sense of what we have here first before we decide to figure out how to maximize the window, bring players in and add to the group.
Last thing in sports, former Minnesota Viking Adam Thielen officially announced his retirement today. So a Viking legend done, and Aaron Rodgers, his former teammate in Pittsburgh, everyone's still waiting on him too.
It's time to take a breath with your Daily Bright Spot.
Happening today in Stillwater, the first day of the World Snow Celebration. What is that, you say? Well, it is happening right now over at Lowell Park. The World Snow Celebration is home to the World Snow Sculpting Championship, which is wild to see. You can watch the entire sculpting process, and these sculptors are coming from all over the world to build these giant snow sculptures.
Is it snow or is it similar to ice too? Because ice, they have to use chainsaws, right?
Yeah,
it's
right.
Crazy.
Yeah, wild. Yeah, both. And you can actually vote on which one you like the best.
Well, and now the weather turned because it was warm over the weekend.
And I'm sure they were a little nervous. They were like, oh, we're still going to have this? Are we going to have to bring in like air conditioning?
Oh, it's freezing.
No, now it's freezing. Exactly. Hopefully it'll last because this competition goes through this next Saturday. And the winners of the competition will be announced Saturday night.
There we go.
If you want to do something Saturday morning, go check it out. With Johnny Connor, I'm Maria Lizignoli. This has been 4 Things to Know. We're here with the news you need every weekday afternoon by 3 o'clock.
Listen to 4 Things to Know, a WCCO daily news podcast, wherever you get your podcasts.